Hey friends, my name is Steven with Leviathan Snakes, and we are back with another marketing video. This here, first, is Prada. She is our Super Banana Sunset girl, and we are absolutely stoked to have her. She's about 1,300 grams, and maybe late this season, maybe early next season, will be her first time going. We are absolutely excited because we're planning on pairing her to Aries, our visual sunset male, which means that the entire clutch, no odds at all, every single baby in that clutch will be banana sunsets, and banana sunsets look incredible. But back on to the topic of this week's video, it's marketing, and we want to talk about what makes really good, what makes amazing content, and there are actually 6 attributes of amazing content. Now, these attributes come from a book called Making It Stick. Absolutely amazing book. I highly recommend it. We're going to put a link to like the Amazon listing for it down below. I really like this book, and they go into all of these things in way more depth. They give examples, they do case studies, and they also talk about like why they decided, the authors, I think it's Dan and Chip Heath. I could be wrong on that. I'll put like a subtitle if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, they talk about it in way more depth, so definitely check out the book if you think that this is interesting and it's something you want to learn more about. Now, the 6 attributes of amazing content, these are things that are used to make something more memorable. Because if an audience can remember what your message is and they're able to clearly articulate it to other people, you're able to generate word of mouth, you're able to do better on recollection, and if you're selling a product or service, when that audience needs your product or service, they're going to be way more likely to remember a brand that is sticky, if that makes sense, than a brand that they've seen a bunch of ads, but they all blend together and they don't really stand out. So, very first thing that we're going to get into, very first attribute, is simplicity. Simplicity, when it comes to this type of thing, means that you are only conveying the core message, the specific thing that you want to get your audience to remember. And the reason why I say that this is super important, and as well as why the book says it's super important, is that if you are trying to teach your audience about every single project that you possibly own, if you're breeding ball pythons, there's just no way that they can remember that. So we are into sunset. We talk about sunset all the time. We're also into clown, and we're into the asphalt project. We're a little bit into Exantic, we're a little bit into toffee, we're into the campfire project, we're into bells. We have so many different things that's going on, but really our main one is sunset and freeway/asphalt. Those are our 2 main ones. Mine's sunset. Courtney really likes the asphalt project, though we like both of them. But if we were trying to market ourselves as the place to go if you are going to get clowns, Exantics, sunsets, asphalts, bells, bananas, campfire stuff, it's going to be so much that people aren't going to be able to remember it all. And because there's so much going on and it's taking away from like the core of what we really like the most, it's most likely that they won't even remember that we are really invested and really like the Sunset and Freeway project. Now, when you are developing out your messaging, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can only say one project that you're in. It's just that when you are trying to create content or marketing or anything like that, only focusing on one thing at a time. So if you are making a YouTube video and the YouTube video has an educational value, we made a video on the different types of content, but in it you want to kind of like promote your sunset project. Only talk about the sunset project, or primarily talk about the sunset project in relation to the other content. So that way if you're given examples, you can say, the sunset project did this, or the sunset project did that. That way, the simplicity of your message is just always coming through and you have that one strong through line. It's going to make it way easier for people to remember. The second attribute of amazing content is unexpectedness. Now, unexpectedness can be done in lots of different ways, but I do think that to make it effective, to make your message memorable, the unexpected element has to relate to your core message. And the example that they give in the book that I really like, and I'm just going to pretty much like paraphrase it, is the book talks about how there was this car ad. And if you can imagine, there's this family that are like leaving soccer practice, they all pile into like a minivan or something. It's a nice looking minivan, but just no different than any other kind of car commercial. And they're driving and they're showing all the different features of it. They're driving through the city and they pull up to this red light and it goes into like the boy who's playing soccer and he's staring out the window. There's a little bit of like water drops on the window, and as the car starts to move from the stoplight, it gets smashed by a semi-truck. And then the screen goes to black, and then letters come up, and it's like, I think that they said, again, this is a paraphrase, but like, accidents are never expected, always buckle up. And this unexpected nature of the ad is what's able to make it so memorable and so powerful, especially because it directly relates to their message. The reason why they're able to make this unexpected thing happen is because they were able to establish a pattern that the audience knew beforehand. And this pattern was car commercials. Everybody's seen car commercials, they know how they go, but they don't end with the person getting into a horrible accident. Now, by creating a pattern and then breaking the pattern, it's going to make whatever broke the pattern stand out way, way more. So if we're talking about ball pythons, we'll say us. So if we are on a live, we're always talking about Sunset because I'm obsessed with them. And we are interviewing a live, or we're being interviewed on a live, and somebody asks, what projects do we think are like poised to like really, really rise? We could say Sunset, and most people would hear that and it kind of reaffirms our belief. But if we broke the pattern that regular listeners of us or regular watchers of us know, and instead of saying that we think Sunset's gonna rise and it's gonna be amazing, and we say instead that we think it's gonna be Lace, the fact that it broke the pattern of what people are most expecting from us makes the weight of that stand out way more. Not that like we are big experts or anything, but if everybody knows that I love sunsets and I'm always talking about sunsets, and then suddenly I'm talking about this other morph, it's gonna make that other morph stand out way more than me just talking about sunsets again. So just while you are trying to create unexpected content, find ways where you can establish patterns that the audiences are aware of, and then find ways to break them while reinforcing the message that you're trying to convey. Attribute number 3 is concrete details. And the reason why concrete details are so important is that if you are trying to remember something in the future, oftentimes people are able to remember very, very specific sensation or visual details that almost like lets them put themselves in the scene in like their mind's eye, their imagination. So if you are able to include, especially if it's just audio, or like if it's a video and you're talking about something, if you're able to include very, very specific information that is concrete, you are going to be able to make it easier to remember later on. And this can be in like things like tying in a very, very specific color whenever you're dealing with your branding. That way, people, when they see that very specific concrete color, that exact shade of purple, they might think, oh, that's Leviathan Snakes. That's the Leviathan Snakes purple, even if it's just something that we just adopted. But that way you are able to have these very, very specific concrete details that are able to remind people later on about whatever your brand or message or anything like that. Now, only thing on the concrete details, a lot of times people think that like statistics and facts are concrete because they provide evidence to determine like, if you were to say that X amount of people own ball pythons in the United States and that number has risen by X amount of percentage in the last couple of years, they might think that that's really, really concrete because it's so verifiable that somebody could go fact check them. But numbers inherently, especially statistics, and especially statistics that get beyond what you can really visualize, are inherently abstract. So if you are trying to get somebody to remember what your message is, you don't want to rely on statistics. Think about the last interesting statistic that you heard and try to remember the exact number, and it's really, really hard. You might be like, it was like a really big majority, like 60, 70 some percent, but I don't actually remember. And that's just like an example of why like number-based statistics to try to provide the concreteness don't really work. Element number 4 that makes amazing, memorable content is credibility. So there's different ways that you can go about establishing credibility, but if nobody believes what you're saying when you say it, they're not going to remember it later on. So if you are able to establish credibility up front, this can often be done with like appeals to authority, and this can be like somebody who's been in the ball python hobby for 20 years. Their opinion on the surface is probably going to be more memorable than somebody who's been in for 2 months. But there's lots of different ways that you can establish authority, and it doesn't necessarily have to be how long have you been doing something. You can connect it to other life experience. Like for us, when we talk about all the marketing things, the life experience that I often draw upon is the fact that for my day job, I work as a digital marketing supervisor. So I'm in charge of the digital marketing for this bank that serves the East Coast, and I really, really love my job. My education is all related to marketing, and I've pretty much been doing marketing pretty much since I've been an adult. Now, because of this, even though we haven't been in the ball python hobby very long, that experience, the fact that I do it for a living, adds credibility to any time that I would talk about marketing versus somebody who may have just as good of ideas and just the exact same ideas that I have, but they don't have the background. So the background, how you're able to establish credibility to your audience, is really important to making your ideas memorable. Finding ways to make yourself seem credible to your audience is really, really important. So keep that in mind when you're trying to build out content or brand that you want people to remember you for. The fifth of the 6 different things that make amazing content is emotional impact. If you are able to consistently generate emotions in your audience, it is going to make your content seem so much more powerful. And there's lots of different emotions that you can do. If you want to be motivational, maybe you're trying to make people inspired, and you can show like a way that you overcame the odds and it came out okay. Or you can talk about like the necessity to like grind it out, and that there's a bunch of hard work, but at the end of the day, it's all worth it. And if you're able to do this while generating the emotion of inspiration, your content's going to do really, really well. And it's very likely that people will remember the emotional impact that it gave. So there's lots of different emotions you can explore. I was talking about a pretty positive one with inspiration, but this also happens with anger. Think about something that you saw on social media that genuinely made you mad, and it's very likely that you will remember whatever it was and kind of why it made you mad, even if it happened weeks ago, where there might be something that made you chuckle just a little bit and now you've completely forgotten it and you can't find it ever again. So just find the stronger the emotion is that you can create with in alignment to your messaging and brand values, the more memorable that your content is going to be. Now, the 6th and the last one. Now, it might be a little bit harder to do than a lot of the other ones, because the other ones are very, very specific, and that they're kind of like one thing. The 6th one is stories. A story, for whatever reason, is way more memorable than a fact or a like entire lecture on a topic. So like this entire video probably isn't going to be very memorable, but that one little bit, that story about the ad where it looks like a car commercial and then the car ends up crashing into a semi-truck, that is probably going to be way more memorable than the rest of this entire video. And the reason why is that people in general remember plots really, really well. They can remember a sequence of events happening rather than simply remembering raw information. So if you're able to create stories around your brand, around your message, it's going to be way more likely that people are going to remember them. And within the framework of stories, which there's lots of different frameworks that you can kind of look to, it makes it really, really easy to be able to find ways to create emotional impact. You can make unexpected twists. So really, this entire kind of video is talking about if you can find ways about your brand or your business that can tell a story, people are going to love it, and it's going to be very, very likely that the people who hear that story, especially if it's a good story, are going to remember it in the future. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next time.